Welcome to the Bruton Knowles Landmark podcast. My name's Neil Young. I'm the HR Director at Bruton Knowles. Over the last 10 years, I've been instrumental in driving the Bruton Knowles people strategy, and that includes various things such as our Work Your Way culture, and which is fully embedded in our recruitment process. So some of the themes we're going to be discussing today are around the recruitment landscape. So that could be skill shortages, the intense demand we're experiencing at the moment for key skills in order to meet client needs. So within the recruitment space, we're looking at things like the skill shortages and how we fill those gaps, the culture of the organisation, the Bruton Knowles branding, and what we can do to really attract people into our organisation. So that's some of the themes we're going to be discussing today. So I would like to welcome the other contributors today. So the HR and talent team. So I would firstly like to introduce Naomi Corcoran, who's our talent specialist, Chris Doyle, also a talent specialist, and Olivia Gardiner, who's our HR coordinator. So going back a few months or so, we established a new approach to recruitment. So traditionally, recruitment, when I first started my career, was all about placing ads, people applying for jobs, arranging interviews, and a high reliance on external entities such as recruitment consultants. So in that regard, there would be a lot of expenditure, and it would be really difficult to embed what the culture is all about within the organisation and to translate that to candidates, because they were sort of a middleman, as it were. So what I did a few months ago was to create the talent team, so take everything in-house. So we don't use recruitment agencies anymore, and we build the capability internally. So by doing that, I can make sure there's full alignment with what the goals are of the organisation, the growth strategy, and also what we really want to see culturally from the individuals and the values they demonstrate. So I'm just going to open up to the group and get some really interesting insights from my colleagues here. So Chris, I just wanted to ask you a quick question regards to your previous roles and your experience. So how would you say your previous experience lends itself to surveying, or what the differences are?
I think that there's similarities in terms of the skills needed. Working in the defence sector before, I was working on some landmark defence projects, and that required some niche skill sets. So the skills ratio to the amount of roles is similar. Obviously, within our industry, there's more roles than there are surveyors, and it seems to be a bit of a scramble to get surveyors. So there's similarities in that sense. I think one of the biggest differences I've found since I've joined Bruton Knowles is that the candidates are difficult to identify, especially on LinkedIn. So there doesn't seem to be a willingness to put much information on the profiles, and a lot of surveyors don't even put if they're chartered or not. So as a plea from me, if any surveyors are listening, please put your chartered on your profile, and please put, at least a little bit of experience, and then the right recruiters will message you, and you might get less messages then as well. And
your experience is very much data-driven recruitment, isn't it? Because I know with LinkedIn, for example, I think you're in the top quartile of recruiters on LinkedIn. Yeah. So you've got a few accolades there. So in regards to data and for us to be driven in regards to identifying those potential candidates, how do you use LinkedIn in order to do that?
So I think obviously with LinkedIn Recruiter, you always start with the bedrock, which is understanding the job role that you're recruiting for and the team that they're going to be going into, and building that pipeline up. Not to go into too many details about the whole recruitment process, but essentially, I think that building that initial pipeline, crafting that initial message that's going to engage those identified targets, that's what's important. And one of the advantages of using LinkedIn Recruiter is you can use the data that's already built into the the system to see how that's doing, how that messaging's performing, what the engagement's like from that messaging, and you can alter the way that you're doing those initial reach outs. So yeah, just on the LinkedIn side of data stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Well, we'll do a sort of more of a deep dive into some of these things shortly. But Naomi, I'd be interested to hear from you with your skill set, with headhunting, engagement with candidates, and also building relationships with property groups and forums. So, what skills do you think you bring to the fore in regards to recruitment within surveying?
So so in my role here, I'm focusing on supporting Neil in delivering the recruitment strategy and working with our business partners really to understand what they are what their skills shortage is, mapping that out, what areas we need to focus in, and really working towards that. More recently, I've been focusing on the valuation recruitment and building surveying, and I've really, really seen it's a very hard industry to recruit in, and I think it speaks volumes when I had a look at the RICS report, and in there it mentioned about 80% of employees are finding recruitment with surveyors difficulty. But I think we've got a positive message, especially around the hashtag work our way. And even just talking about myself with the hashtag, the hashtag work your way, that's worked quite positively for me in my career here.
Thanks, Naomi. I do think, as you say, the work your way is a major part of our messaging, I think, within Bruton Knowles. And what I would say is that it's authentic. And it's okay for me to say that, but that's what we've heard from candidates and employees, is that we do genuinely support flexible working, hybrid working, and to really map what the requirements are for the role around personal commitments. So, Olivia, it'd be quite interesting to hear, you've been with us for a few months now, and you are integral to the HR operations within Bruton Knowles. What experience do you have of how the work your way, hybrid working has actually impacted positively on our candidates and employees?
Yeah, so I mean, I've spoken to new employees, and they ask about this hybrid working policy that we have, and I kind of explain to them how it works, and I think a lot of them have been quite taken aback, but in a good way, because they'll question me and they'll say, "Well, but is it actually flexible?" And I'll give them examples, and I'll give them examples for me. For example, I'm able to work from the office, I'm able to work from home as well, which has really been really, really good and really useful. And I think it aids a lot of productivity as well with new employees because they're more comfortable. And I think with the flexibility that they, give to us and we give to them, we're able to get a lot more work done. The clients are happy as well because our employees are happy. They're able to do what they want from wherever they want. And I think that's really instrumental. And I think that's really good for Bruton Knowles going forward, is getting more employees in because we have that work your way policy. From an attracting perspective at the moment, that is a really good attracting piece, because a lot of companies write a really great policy on about hybrid working, but when it comes to actually that hybrid working, it's 2 days in the office and working from home, whereas we are work your way, and no week is the same. Especially in that valuation piece, a lot of our surveyors are on the road to then go into the office, which is in a city centre. It doesn't make sense for them to go all the way into the office, then to go and, if they've got childcare or whatever their outside responsibilities are, it's challenging, and it's not, when we're looking at challenges in recruitment and the talent in the market, it's not supporting that, and women in careers as well. I think we're really championing that, and it has really helped me attract women into surveying, and I think I'm quite passionate about that. And we need to do more of that, and I think we are looking at how recruitment can support that talent too.
The other thing I was thinking of was the expectations of candidates. So we've talked about hybrid working, our working away policy, which I think is us, I wouldn't say reacting to candidate expectations. It is being the forefront and pushing that agenda, because we see the benefits of that, and we've got lots of examples of that. And what I've seen, and what Olivia's seen as well, is that people are coming back to Bruton Knowles. So people who worked with us prior to COVID are working for our competitors, who are starting to put more restrictions in place in regards to their working practices. So that was an advantage for us, is they're joining us because they know us, that we're a well-known brand. They know we're at the forefront of key projects across the UK, and we offer that flexibility for them as a person. So I think, we've had, I think 10% of our workforce over the last year or so are returners, which I think it speaks for itself, really.
Why do you think some companies are pulling back from the remote work?
Well, I would say my perceptions, and actually some of it is founded in government research, for example, is that I think it's a trust issue. That would be my key observation, and I think when you don't have trust in employment, you're on the back foot. You've really got, I always say, you've got to start with trust. So you give employees the tools to do their job, you provide them with the career opportunities, you put all the supports in place, and you demonstrate the values of the organisation, which is trust, empowerment, and so on, collaboration, opportunity to develop your career. So I think that is the foundation of any employment relationship. I'm always about, start with trust, but also with regards to performance management, performance speaks to itself. With us, it'd be fee levels, it'd be contribution
it's binary,
to a project.
Isn't it? You're either succeeding or you're not succeeding.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. So that's what,
Was it Steve Jobs that said, if you don't trust them, don't employ them? I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. Sorry, Steve.
No. Well, from a psychological perspective, they say it's a psychological contract, isn't it? Yeah. So speaking to what Olivia said earlier about we provide flexibility to employees, and the reward for Bruton Knowles is you get the going the extra mile, you get the adding value to the business. All of these examples then enable them to progress their career, bonuses, all of that kind of thing. So it sort of lends itself and contributes to each other.
How many people got promoted? Because there was a lot.
Yeah, well, last year, at least 10% of our workforce were promoted. And, you look at other organisations that may promote people to try to retain them. Yeah. We don't do that at Bruton Knowles. We are genuine in regards to career progression. So those promotions are people who've provided loyalty to Bruton Knowles. They've risen to opportunity. And we've been able to promote them because they've developed their skills and they're contributing significantly to the business. And I think with promotion as well, which is very different from other organisations, is the promotional process includes an informal meeting with the managing partner, myself, and another partner. So the leadership team and the shareholders of the organisation are at the table. So if you're a graduate, if you're, whatever level within the organisation, you will have exposure to the leaders of the organisation. So at the beginning of the podcast, I talked about the transition we've undertaken from traditional recruitment and evolving to sort of more modern practices, and the journey we've been through in regards to less reliance on recruitment consultants, less reliance on placing ads and recruitment ads and hoping for the best. So really, to differentiate ourselves and move to the next level, as I mentioned earlier, we brought everything in-house. So we're building our own capability. So we've got more ability to be agile and adapt to the market. So what would be helpful, Naomi, is just for me to sort of understand what you're doing actually with the candidates you're engaging with, to connect with them, to understand where they're coming from, to really get under the skin of what their skills and motivations are.
Yeah, since joining Bruton Knowles, I have noticed, the traditional of writing that job advert and being being creative around that job advert. We don't have surveyors or valuation surveyors applying on the traditional way from a job advert, albeit it's good for getting the brand out there and understanding the crux of the role, but them actually applying because they're so in demand. As we've seen it in the report from the RICS, we've got stats there that support that. So it's having to think a bit more creative in our approach to speaking to the talent and to the market. And one area that I've looked at is working with women in property, industry events, and just speaking to people. And I think there's been, AI, it is positive, that automation, that, there is positiveness there, but also it's taking away the human side of it as well, and understanding, understanding that person's experience, wants and needs. AI can't really at the moment do that. It's for us to go and speak to that, to those candidates, and sometimes I go and have a coffee with them as well, just to understand more about it's building those relationships, where I don't think AI has quite got there with building relationships, whereas we can build relationships, build that talent pipeline, because you never know where somebody is in their journey, in their career journey, and things change. And I'm proud to say that at Bruton Knowles, we like you said, we talked about, is we do offer that flexibility as well as technology. We've really invested heavily in our technology.
And I think, I mentioned earlier about authenticity. And I think that is so important, because we connect as people to people. And you mentioned about meeting for a coffee or going to events, is that, that's when we really understand the person. And that engagement is, I think, very important, because as we said with things like talent pipelines, or the data we have on individuals, is data's one element, but to move it to the next stage is that personal connection. So I think that works to our advantage. And some organisations, some of our competitors, some larger organisations would, because they're recruiting high volumes of people, that connection may not be there, but as we're a smaller HR and talent team, we are able to really make those connections and invest in those candidates.
I was just going to add something there, actually, that I think some candidates, we'll speak to them. Naomi, Chris might meet them for a coffee or whatever, and they might have a chat with the owners of the business, and I think that's a really good thing that they can do that. There's some companies that I guess are a lot bigger than ours, and they don't really ever get that exposure. But one of the things that I've noticed with recruitment especially is that sometimes candidates aren't ready to jump ship. They aren't ready to start a new job, but we keep in touch with them. We keep in touch with them, really. We see how they're doing. It might be 6 months' time. They might think, I had a really positive experience with that recruitment team. I want to explore my options now. And, they've built that relationship with those employees that they'll come to us.
The days of high street recruitment, high volume reach outs, I think that's going. I think the future for recruitment now, especially for external agencies, will be more on the boutique and specialisms. I think for an agency to survive now, I think they need to be real experts in their industry. So obviously with the advent of tech, like you said, and AI, if you're doing volume recruitment in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, you're going to be able to get a bot to do most of that. Yeah. So I think it is difficult out there at the moment for recruitment agencies, and I think the ones that will do the best are the ones that will use AI as a tool and have that specialisms and be renowned within that industry.
Can I just go back to something what Olivia said, because it is this, you know how you were saying about that exposure to the decision makers. That's been really positive in that interviewing process as well, because you're speaking to the decision makers at the start and the partners. So we keep our recruitment process very simple, or just not overcomplicated. And that's really supported our time to hire as well, because that individual will have a chat with them about Bruton Knowles, etc. Then they'll go straight to having a discussion with one of our partners in the business, and we can make decisions very quickly. And we have made decisions very quickly. We've got examples of somebody, it took just 2 weeks to go from speaking to somebody on LinkedIn to interview to offer, all in a space of 2 weeks. And we're supported by, we've got because we are a smaller team and we have a very savvy HR team, Olivia, that, you generate, it's very quick. We send out offers within 24 hours. There's not very many companies, and especially our competitors, that have that savviness of that process.
And it's so important, isn't it, that we are agile. As I said before, there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of demand out there. So yeah, we need to be agile. And I think what you touched upon there, Naomi, is working in partnership with the hiring managers, and I think that is so important for us to understand what the needs are, what the skill requirements are, and what the person requirements are fit with Bruton Knowles. What values do they demonstrate, and so on. So that is very important. But also when we're engaging with those candidates, we're able again to talk authentically about these are the projects we're working on. You can get involved with this project. So give some real life examples. And some of these projects, they are big projects. They are big national projects that, for our size of organisation, medium size organisation, we've been, awarded very significant projects across the UK that we can give people opportunities to contribute to. Yeah. So it's things like that. But, as I mentioned before about partnering with hiring managers, and I know we've got lots of examples of this, of where, yes, we have a conversation, we contact them on LinkedIn or one of our other sort of mechanisms or methods. We have that 15-minute chat to understand the person. And within a fairly short period of time, they could be meeting with the decision makers. So they could be meeting with the head of that team, or they could be meeting with the partner, they could be meeting with the managing partner or the shareholder within a fairly short period of time.
Yeah, I'm constantly arranging meetings between Nigel and a candidate in, say so, Starbucks in Yorkshire, and then the next day it's London. So yeah. I hope he's got a membership card.
I think that's really important to note as well, is that relationship, once that employee has started with us, is that it doesn't end with the shareholders, the decision makers. Is that even in my role myself, I speak with them mostly every day about something, and I think that's really good. And you have that relationship with them. They are in themselves kind of employees as well. They do the work as well. And it's really good to have that relationship with them. And I think a lot of our new employees have said, I've never had this exposure with decision makers before, so I think that's a really good selling point that we have as well.
I know, and just touching on that as well, we've got, from senior surveyors to associate level, they are involved with James Bailey, with Ian Pitt, with the shareholders as well through that interview process. And I think that is a really selling point and a positive that other companies don't do. And I think sometimes just going back, a candidate's frustration sometimes is when you go through the recruitment, it gets very lost when it goes to HR, where we're very close we work very collaborative together on that, and that builds that trust and experience for that candidate as well, through both departments, through recruitment and to HR.
And I think the positives of having an internal team like ours is we understand the business. You know, we're speaking to surveyors daily. None of us are surveyors, but sometimes it feels as if we are, because we do know, what the skills requirements are. We know what the projects are. We know what the opportunities are. So we're really able to showcase that to candidates, I think. Whereas if you would look at sort of traditional methods of recruitment agencies, they're never going to be fully immersed within the business if they're not an employee of the business. So, yeah.
It's not just about a job spec going out and filling that job spec. It's about what that individual can bring to the table and what their whole experience is. For example, they might have experience in red book valuations or trade valuations or care homes, etc. And what was nice is when I arranged an interview with our national valuations head, Ian Pitt, when I told them what that person's experience was, he was like, oh, actually, let's bring in one of the other partners in land and development and have a chat with them, because they've got land and development experience as well. So it's having that collaborative thinking and that, that autonomy as well.
Okay, so thanks everyone for those for that input and insight. So when we make an offer to candidates, obviously that's the first part of the journey from an employment perspective. So I know Naomi, Chris and Olivia work together, and with my input as well in regards to the offer process. So to make sure that the offer is sort of tailored around that individual, and as you said earlier, Naomi, we make sure that the information is there quickly. After the interview process. So that's very much the early stages and first step. So then the next step of the journey is the onboarding and connection in regards to, once a person's accepted an offer, is to then engage them fully within the organisation. So Olivia, our HR coordinator, is integral to that. So would manage the offer process, the onboarding and the full employee life cycle. So Olivia, can you just take us through your approach to onboarding and the changes we've made over recent times?
Yeah, so it's kind of touching on us moving away from a traditional recruitment method. We've also, I would say, moved away from a traditional onboarding kind of system as well. I've been in jobs like many of us have. We've had forms thrown at us and it's kind of like, here you go, see you next week or see you next month. And we've become much more people-centric. I think that's really important. So, for example, one of the things that I've changed is any of the, forms that you have to fill out, whether it be a payroll form, for example, it's all online. And instead of me sending all of that sort of stuff to them on their first day, they have that done before they start. We don't want their first day to be stressful and they think, oh, I just spent my first day filling all this stuff out. They are going to be with the decision makers or with partners, with their other colleagues, discussing what the projects they're going to be doing. And that's what we want from day one. And I think also the other thing is keeping the recruitment team in the process as well. So they'll see all of the communications I have with these guys as well, and it might be that they ring, the employee might ring Naomi or Chris to ask questions and they'll come to me, or, vice versa. And I think that's really good, is that some companies, their recruitment team is very, very separate from the HR team, and that just isn't the case with us. And we keep in touch with the candidates as well. So, some people might have a 3-month notice period, and that's quite a long time not to hear from your future employer. So we always keep in contact with them, if there's anything they need, will they need any IT equipment, anything just as simple as just checking in and just saying, oh, how was your weekend? Are you looking forward to starting with us? And I think that's where we've become much more people-centric, and new employees are really liking that, and they're not just kind of left to themselves for the next couple of months before they start with us.
And just adding on to what Olivia said there about the onboarding process, the hiring managers are also involved in that onboarding process, because a lot of, because we are actively targeting talent out there, they're not necessarily looking. So a lot of the time their notice period is 3 months plus sometimes. And there's lots of negotiation around that. But what's good is because their notice period is so long, the hiring managers, even in valuations, they'll also get involved with that onboarding by speaking to that candidate over every few weeks as well, just to keep them involved in the process. So they're not just, yes, we've gone to offer, we've got their forms, that's it now until they start. There's a nice progressive touch points through them before they've started.
So moving ahead to the future, recruitment, talent management and so on, we've touched upon a lot of subjects here and topics, and we could probably speak all day about some of these topics. So my perceptions and my view of 2026 and beyond is that it's moving from that traditional to a people-focused recruitment, and I think we're doing that, and we will continue doing that. Skills-based hiring, so understand the person, understand their skills. It might not be obvious from day one or on a LinkedIn profile, as Chris said earlier, of what the skills are of that individual. It's important to have that conversation to really get under the skin of what the skills that person has. There's been lots of real good examples of, we would identify someone who may work in utilities and infrastructure, but wants to move out and do something else. And I know Chris has got an example of that, of where we initially had conversation with someone because they were in the utilities and infrastructure space, but they had an aspiration to move into a different area. So we were able to facilitate that, and actually that person ended up working within a separate team. And I think strategic partnerships is another big ticket item. So we have those strategic partnerships internally. So with the leadership of the organisation, the hiring managers, understanding what the business is all about, what the culture is, work your way is something we feed into all of our conversations with candidates, and also putting them in touch with the key decision makers within the organisation. So I think that's very important. And data driven. So we are data driven, as the first step to actually identify people, and then we progress that into that people-centric approach. And looking at technology in general, we touched upon AI earlier, and we are all advocates of AI to a certain level, I think. AI is very good for automated processes or whatever it might be, identifying people, identifying companies, understanding what companies are all about through ChatGPT and so on. But not just to rely on AI, because we need to really engage with those people as individuals. So that would be my observations for 2026 and beyond. I don't know if anyone else has any other observations for the years ahead.
Yeah, I do. So I think with the way that the kind of the recruitment climate is kind of going, and you have all these government decisions, I think we will see a lot of companies, like we said earlier, moving back to office-based and kind of getting rid of that hybrid working model. And, that's not the case with us. And I think that's going to really benefit us when we are hiring throughout the year, is that a lot of them, candidates might think, my company's moving back to 5 days in the office. I can't do that. It doesn't work with my priorities outside of work. And we can then step in and say, well, actually, we're not going to change that at all. We're staying completely the same. You can do what works for you, and, we trust you to do the work. And I think that's really going to benefit us, especially in this coming year.
Yeah, I think for me, it'll be working with Naomi to make our reach outs more impactful. I think it's a very crowded space, a noisy space. I think surveyors get multiple messages a week, so it's developing ways to evolve and keep sharp and be ahead of the game. And employer branding and things like that, and podcasts like this are part of that.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, the future for recruitment, I think 2 points that I wanted to highlight was I really want to look at attracting more women into surveying. I'd like to look at what our recruitment is doing to support that. You know, we've got partners in the business. We've got Teresa, who set up Women in CPO. And Bruton Knowles have supported that, you know, so it is, you know, looking at more of ways of how we can attract women in surveying, also looking at how, you know, we, you know, look at our team and looking at our strengths, and working with Chris as well. So thank you for that comment. But yeah, it's working for Chris, you know, working as, you know, we work as a team as well. Yeah. And I think that's a positive, because even when it comes to the candidate, you know, either one of us will speak to somebody, and because we do work so good together, it, you know, if that person isn't right for us, we're like, oh, actually speak to Chris, you know, in his world, etc. So we've got that transparency and collaboration.
No candidate hoarding.
Yes, no.
Yep.
It's it's positive. But yeah, I'd say the future for me is the women in surveying, and embracing AI and technology.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks so much for your insights there. And, you know, another thing, just to come to sort of a final point on that, is all of these things that we're doing is very important for the growth of Bruton Knowles, and we're on that journey, and we've had some really good successes, I think, and we've welcomed some key industry talent into Bruton Knowles, and we'll continue to do that, and that in turn enables us to deliver very effectively to clients, and those clients will be national organisations. So we're able to marry the HR, the talent, to actual business improvement and progression. Huge thank you to my colleagues here. So thanks to Naomi for your inputs and insights. Thanks to Chris, and also Olivia as well. So thanks so much for your time today. So that brings us to the end of our podcast. So thank you for listening. Feel free to connect to any of us on LinkedIn, and follow Bruton Knowles on LinkedIn, and also visit our website. So again, thanks so much, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.